lesson are Introduction, Uses of Water, Sources of Water, wherein we will talk about groundwater and rainfall, water cycle, significance of water, drought, conservation of water, rainwater harvesting. Water, something which is very important for our survival. Now, what are those things for which we think of water? We feel thirsty, we drink water. So will you be able to live without drinking water? No, right? So if you do not drink water for a couple of hours, maybe for 5-6 hours, what happens? You start feeling uncomfortable, you feel thirsty, you could feel dryness inside your body. And if that persists for a longer time, it can cause more problems. So our body needs water for its survival. So water is something which is very, very important, not only for us, but for all living organisms for their survival. So we can say that water is precious. Now, in our day-to-day life, if we look at the uses of water, where all do we use water? So we need water for drinking, we need water for cooking. For example, how do we boil vegetables? We need water. Even to prepare any curry or to prepare the dough, we need water. So for cooking, water is needed. For bathing, for cleaning our clothes, for drinking, for making tea, coffee, juices. So everywhere we have water. So in our day-to-day life, water plays a very crucial role. So forget about how water is important for our survival. Just think of the activities that we do on a daily basis. We will not be able to do them if there is no water. So we need sufficient amount of water around us. Only then we will be able to carry out the basic activities of life. Now, not only our household activities, water also plays a crucial role in industries and factories. So in industries, water is used for washing and cleaning purposes, for cooling purposes, because in industry, a lot of, whether you talk about industry or factory, many substances get heated, a lot of heat is there. So in order to produce some cooling effect, water is used. So water finds its application in a lot of factories and industry. If you talk about a paper factory, so water acts as a very important raw material. Without water, the factory cannot run. So in the process of paper manufacture, water plays again a very crucial role. You talk about agriculture. So water can act as a coolant. It can also be used for washing or cleaning purposes. So that's how it is useful in various industries and factories. Now, if you talk about agriculture, so in agriculture again, water plays a very crucial role. So for cultivating crops on such a large scale, so that's what we do in agriculture. So we cultivate crops. Now every plant needs water for their growth. So watering each and every plant is very crucial, otherwise the plants would die. Now think of your own garden. So if you do not water the plants in your garden, what would happen to them? The plants would eventually die. So when we talk about agriculture, it is like a huge stretch of land with a lot of plants over it. Now if you stop providing water to all of those plants, what would happen? They would not give you any crops. So in agriculture, it is very important that the field is given proper supply of water so that the field can support the growth of plants over it. So this process of supplying water to the crops during cultivation, that is known as irrigation. Now there are various methods these days of providing water to the plants, but in India especially, agriculture is largely dependent on rainfall. So rainfall is from where the water comes to the fields. So in this way, we see that water plays a crucial role in different spheres of life. It plays a crucial role in the life processes that take place inside the body of living organisms. It plays a crucial role in our day-to-day activities, household activities like washing, cleaning, cooking, etc. It plays a critical role in industries and factories as well as agriculture. And agriculture is the process by which our food is prepared. So if there is no agriculture, we will not get anything to eat. So in every important sphere, water is needed. So water is important for life. Now, as I was telling, that it is not only the human being who needs water, all animals, insects, birds, microorganisms, all of them need water for their survival. So you think of any kind of living organism, whether it is plants or animals or insects or aquatic animals, everybody needs water. So we can say that water is important for life. So now the next question is, how much water do we need? So we saw that we need water for a variety of purpose, for cooking, drinking, washing, bathing, etc. But the question is, how much exactly water do we need? Now it is, when we say we, each member in our family needs water, either to wash, cook, bath, drink, etc. Therefore, more members we have in a family, more water is needed, because each member will need water for each of these activities, whether it is food. So if you have 10 members in a family, you need to prepare larger amount of food. So that would need larger amount of water. If there are only 2 members in a family, you need to prepare less food. So there will be less water that is needed. So each of these activities would need water. And the more number of people that exists in a family, the more amount of water you would need. So if it is a small family, you would need lesser number of water. But if it is a bigger family, you would definitely need more and more water. So basically, how much water we need depends on how many people do we have in our family. Now, you would have often heard people saying that water is very precious. Now, that's very true. In the last few slides, we saw that water is extremely crucial. So, and we have a limited supply of water. We will learn about that a little later. So, if the consumption of water increases too much, in that case, we might arrive at a situation where there will be scarcity of water, where there would be insufficient water. So, again, that is going to cause us problem, because we cannot survive without water, end of the day. So, it is very important that unnecessarily children are not being born unnecessarily. Do not prefer to have a very big family where there are 10 children or 12 children. So a smaller family would need smaller amount of water, and that would help everyone. Water. From where exactly are we getting water? So where do we get water from? Now it could be the hand pumps, it could be the wells or the tube wells, it could also be the taps. So these are the places from where we get water in our homes. So in our houses, we find water directly in the wash basins. So you just open the tap and you get water. So that seems to be very easy. But the question is, that water which comes out from the tap, that water comes through the pipelines from some other source of water. So you have the water pipelines. Right? So from those pipelines, the water comes to your tap, or the water comes to maybe the hand pump. But the question is, that water which is there inside the pipe, where is that water coming from? So that water might come from the water from some nearby water bodies, maybe a nearby pond or a nearby lake or a nearby river. So in fact, in small villages and small towns, water is directly fetched from the nearby pond or river. So the technology is not that advanced there, so you really do not have so much of water pipeline system there. So a lot of people, they carry buckets and they fetch water from the nearby pond or river. So that's how we get water. So basically from this we get to see that water comes to us from the water bodies, whether it is a pond, lake, river, sea, ocean, whatever. So from there only water comes, and then it comes to us in many different forms. So when we talk about ocean, because ponds are like part of some streams or rivers, and the rivers, they combine together to form ocean. So basically ocean is the primary source. So it is a significant water supply, because ocean is extremely huge. So it has a lot of water within it. Now when you look at the entire earth, so if you look at the globe, So you can see the entire earth, and this in this sphere you will see that most part of it is blue in color, which just tells us that 2/3 of the earth is covered with water. Yes, that sounds to be a big number, but that's the truth. So 2/3. So if let's say if you have a slice of bread, if you divide it into 3 equal pieces, 1, 2, 3. So out of these 3 parts, 2 parts of it is covered with water and only 1 part is covered with land. And the same calculation holds true for earth. And that is why you see you have more of the blue color, because the blue color represents water and the green color represents land. So green color represents land. And see, there is so much of blue color. That's because 2/3 of the earth is water. And most of this water is present in the seas and oceans. Water comes from these oceans to various water bodies like rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. And then we get the water that we need from these smaller water bodies like rivers, lakes and ponds. Might strike you is seawater is salty. We all know that. So if you have ever been to a sea beach or a coastal area, you would have seen that the seawater is always salty. It contains a lot of salt in it. But the water from the taps that we receive in our home, that is not. Why? Because just now I said that end of the day, the water that comes out of our taps, that comes from the water in the pipelines, they get it ultimately from the nearby water bodies, and the nearby water bodies get the water from the sea. So in that case, if the seawater is coming to our houses, that should also be salty. But that's not the case. The water that comes out of the taps is not salty. So how does that happen? So here comes the concept of evaporation. So we have already discussed about what evaporation is in one of our previous lessons. But again, we will see it, how exactly evaporation helps us to separate the salt from seawater. So let's see what happens during evaporation of seawater. So when we talk about evaporation, it is about heating a liquid such that it changes to its vapor form. So basically the change of a substance from liquid to vapor, that is called evaporation. So liquid water evaporates to form water vapor. Now just try this out at your home. Let's say you take some water in a pan, heat it. Now as soon as you start heating it, what happens? You see that some vapor is formed. Some of the liquid water starts getting converted to water vapor. So this is called evaporation. Now the similar type of evaporation takes place in case of seawater. Now the seawater contains both salt as well as water. The evaporation will take place only for water because salt is not in liquid form. So water is in liquid form. So in this process, what happens is the liquid water. So right now, when you talk about the seawater, so seawater contains salt plus water. This makes the water salty. Now, when the water gets evaporated, this liquid water gets converted to water vapor. What happens to the salt? The salt remains as it is. So basically, the salt and the water get separated. Correct? Okay. The next question would be, okay, so if we say that the salt and the water got separated, the first question is, how evaporation happened or why evaporation of seawater happened? Because we did not heat the seawater. We do not need to heat it because in presence of sunlight, it is anyways getting enough heat. The sunlight has a lot of heat. So in presence of sunlight, evaporation will anyways take place. So all this happens in presence of sunlight. So that's how you are left out with the salt. So that in fact, this is how salt is obtained from the sea. So, because we obtain salt from sea. So you see here, you can see heaps of sand. Heaps of salt. So that's how salt is obtained from sea and the water gets converted to water vapor. So that's how salt and water are separated. Now again, another question. Okay, so the salt and the water got separated because the water which was there in the sea got converted to water vapor. And this water vapor is now present in the air. It is present in the atmosphere. So how is it coming to the taps in our houses? So the water which we are getting in the taps are obtained from the nearby rivers, ponds, lakes, etc. And how water is coming to those rivers, lakes and ponds. So one common way is through rainfall. So what happens is here whatever water was present, so that water gets converted to water vapor. So that water vapor results in the formation of cloud in the atmosphere, and this cloud later gives rise to rainfall. Now whenever there is rainfall, what happens? The rainwater falls into ponds, rivers, lakes, etc. So now this water which we are talking about, the water in the rain or the water in the ponds and rivers, they do not contain any salt. So from these places the water comes to our taps. So that is why the water in our taps do not contain salt, but oceans are like one of the crucial sources of water which we use in our day-to-day life. So not only in the sea, what evaporation of water can be seen also from other places. So let us look at a few examples. Think of this example where, let's say, while doing something, you are carrying a mug of water and some water spilled over the ground. So you see here water is spilled over the surface. Now let's say you do not do anything, you just leave it like that for the entire day. What happens? By next day you see that the surface dried up. So what happened to the water? So that water evaporated. So that water got converted into water vapor, and that's how the surface became dry. Now in this case, you might say that we did not heat the surface. The surface was inside a room. So maybe it was not under the direct exposure of sunlight. So how did evaporation happen? So well, for evaporation, it is not necessary that the presence of sun or the presence of heat is very important. But yes, even if indirectly heat is present, the process of evaporation becomes faster. So heating fastens the process of evaporation. So that's the concept. Again, you look at another example, water from the fields. If you look at huge agricultural fields, so there also water from the fields also evaporates. Some small amount of water tends to evaporate. Think of drying clothes under the sun. You wash your clothes, they are wet. They contain a lot of water within them. You just dry them under the sun. What happens? You see, evaporation happens. Now here I'll talk about a very interesting concept. Now have you ever noticed that whenever you want to dry your clothes, how do you dry them? You open let's say you want to dry a sari. So a sari is like a big huge stretch of cloth. So you open it completely and then you spread it on a wire and you leave it under the sun. And it gets dried up very quickly. But instead of doing that, if you would have taken that wet sari, folded it and then kept it under the sun, in that case what would have happened? So when you fold it and keep it, you would have observed that only the upper surface or only the exposed surface becomes dry. The inner surface still remains wet. But when you open the entire sari and then flatten it and keep it on the wire, then that entire thing gets dried up. That's because evaporation takes place from the surface of any object. Now in this case, when you are completely stretching this entire cloth, in that case the entire surface is being exposed to the heat. So evaporation is taking place from the entire surface. But if you fold it like this in a crumbled shape and keep it under the sun, so only the upper surface is exposed to the sun, so that inner portions will still remain wet. So that is the concept of evaporation. So evaporation of water always takes place from the surface of that object which contains water. So basically the liquid water on the surface will get converted into vapor, and heating increases the rate of evaporation. So if you provide some heat, evaporation will happen faster. So that's the difference. So let us try this out. So let's try to perform an experiment with regards to evaporation. So here we will see that it is not that evaporation can happen only under the sun. It can happen in both shade as well as sun. The only difference is that under the shade, the process will happen slowly as compared to that under the sun. So basically the process of evaporation will take longer time under the shade. So this is the shade. and this is the sun. So you take some water in a bowl, and you actually take two bowls, put some water in both of them, keep one of them directly under the sun and the other one you keep it under the shade, so that it does not receive sunlight directly, but yeah, indirectly it receives some amount of heat, so that no direct sunlight is obtained here, and here direct sunlight is obtained. Now, what do you observe after some time? You leave it as it is without disturbing it for some time, and after some time you notice that the amount of water in this vessel reduced. Why it reduced? Because that amount of water got converted to water vapor. But in this case, the decrease was not at all noticeable. So that means here evaporation is taking place faster. So here faster evaporation is taking place. Now why did that happen? Because under the sun there is enough heat. There is so much of heat that water changes to vapor very quickly. It is the same way as the water contained in a pan heated on a stove. So there also you see that immediately the water starts getting converted to water vapor. Whereas under the shade there is no direct heat. Some heat is obtained because the surrounding air is warm during the day. During daytime anyways the air everywhere is warmer. So even if you are staying inside your house, let's consider that there is no AC inside your house. So when you stay even inside a room, during the afternoon you feel hotter. That's because the surrounding air is hot during the daytime. So in this case also it is not exposed to direct heat, but this surrounding air is warm. And due to this warmth of the air, evaporation happens here also, but slowly. Maybe this much decrease which took place here within a couple of hours, this decrease here might take a day. So basically what we understand from this experiment is, it is not necessary that evaporation needs the presence of sun. Evaporation can happen anywhere, but it occurs from the surface of the liquid. In fact, when you talk about the evaporation being a surface phenomenon, you will also notice that if you take water in a dish and if you take water in a beaker, you would notice a difference in the rate of evaporation again. So let's say you have a beaker like this and you put some water in it, like this. And on the other side you have a plate like this and you have put water like this. And the same amount of water in both the things. Just that the shape of the container is different. So evaporation would be faster in this because here the surface is more. So more amount of liquid will get converted into vapor. But in this case the surface is smaller. So less amount of liquid will get converted to vapor. So that's the difference. So we say that evaporation always occurs from the surface of the liquid. And that is why during drying clothes we stretch the clothes and then put it under the sun so that they dry quickly. Learned that there are various sources of water, out of which oceans are one of the primary sources which provide water for our day-to-day activities. Now, water is also released into the atmosphere from plants. So let's see how. Now, plants, they need water for their survival again. So from where do they get water? They get water from the soil. Now, how do you take care of the plants in your garden? So your garden might have big trees, it might have small plants. If you want them to be alive, what do? You water them regularly. So how do you water a plant? So when we water the plants, we tend to put a lot of water to the soil. Do you know why? Because plants take that water from the soil. That's the job of the roots of the plant. So they help to absorb the water from the soil. Minerals which are also dissolved with water enters the roots of the plants, and then from there the stem carries all the water and minerals to different parts of the plant. So that's how plants receive water from the soil. Now why do plants need water? They need water for photosynthesis. We have learned about photosynthesis. It is the process by which plants prepare their own food in presence of light. What do? During this process, carbon dioxide and water, they combine together to form food in the form of glucose. So this is the food, and oxygen is released during the process. So for photosynthesis to happen, plants need water. So that is one need for the plants. Now the question is, what happens to the excess water that remains within the plant? So sometimes it might happen that okay, the plants used up some amount of water, but there is some water which is present in excess in the plant, because having the right amount of water within any living organism is a must. You cannot have excess amount of water, you cannot have insufficient amount of water. So what will the plants do with that excess of water? So that excess of water is released out through the leaves of the plant. And where is the water released out? So the water is released out to the atmosphere. And how is it released out? Again, that water which is released out to the atmosphere again goes to the atmosphere in the form of water vapor. So this is the process which is called transpiration. So transpiration is the loss of water from leaves of plants by evaporation. So here also the leaves of the plant which are exposed to the atmosphere, which are exposed to the warm surrounding air. So there, whatever water is present, so they start evaporating. So the liquid water gets converted to water vapor. And this process is called transpiration. Now, how water is released from the leaves of the plants? So the leaves contain very tiny pores which are called stomata. So we will talk about stomata a little later. So here we see that water is released as water vapor to the atmosphere. So this is important. So what you have in the surrounding air is water vapor. So you see, there are a lot of things on this earth which contribute in adding water vapor to the atmosphere. One thing that we learned about is the oceans. So by evaporation of the water from the oceans, a lot of water vapor is coming to the atmosphere. Again, by the process of transpiration, a lot of water vapor is coming to the atmosphere from plants. Now, there are many advantages associated with transpiration. First thing is, water is being pulled up from below due to transpiration pull. So that's very true. That's because when the water in the upper surface of the leaves, they move out, so vacancy gets created on the upper surface. So what happens? Water from the inner leaves are pulled above. Similarly, the same pull exists, and finally that pull allows the roots to take up water from the soil. So this entire pull effect is called transpiration pull, and because of this transpiration pull, roots are able to absorb water from the soil, because it needs a lot of force to do something against gravity. So when you throw an apple, what happens? The apple falls towards the ground. So the apple falls in the downward direction. But if you want that object to move in the upward direction, you really need to apply some extra force. And that extra force here is being created by this transpiration pull. Because of the process of transpiration, the water is being always pulled in the upward direction. So as a result, the roots also fetch in water from the soil. So that is the most important advantage of the process of transpiration. Secondly, it cools the plants in hot weather. So have you ever seen that during summer season you don't feel like drinking hot water? So what you often do is, for those who cannot afford a refrigerator, what they do is they take an earthen pot and start storing water in them. And you will see it for yourself that the water inside that mud pot is a lot cooler than that of the normal water. So how does that happen? That happens because that earthen pot, it contains a lot of tiny pores over it. So due to the presence of those pores, tiny droplets of water always tend to come out of those pores. So they create a cool surface on that earthen pot, which results in cooling of the water inside the pot. So the same thing happens here. Here also those pores are present on the leaves, and the pores which are present on the leaves, those pores are called stomata. So this process of transpiration happens through these pores. Through these openings only the water is lost. Now these pores, all the time, since water is coming out of them, so they kind of create a cool ambience. So the entire plant is cooled during hot weather. So that helps the plant to adapt to hot weather or to overcome the high temperatures during summer season. So these are the two important advantages of transpiration. That so much of water vapor gets released to the atmosphere. Some by transpiration from plants, some by evaporation of water. But what happens to all these water vapor that gets collected in the atmosphere? So these water vapor results in the formation of clouds. Yes, that's interesting, right? So let us now try to understand that how clouds are formed. So the first question that we need to answer is it possible to convert the water vapor in the air back into liquid water? Yes, it is very much possible. And in fact, that is what that happens during rainfall. What is rainfall? The clouds get converted into liquid water, and clouds are nothing but water vapor. Now, I will give you an example from our day-to-day life which will prove that this is very much possible. Take out a chilled glass of water from the refrigerator. Remember, you have to take out a chilled glass of water and then you keep it on the table. After some time, what happens? You see droplets of water on the outer surface of the glass. So why do you see those water droplets? Because this was, in fact, you can also prefer to take out this glass of water which was kept in the freezer of your refrigerator, so that the water has already been converted into ice. So when you bring that ice cold water glass in the normal temperature, what happens is liquid water droplets are seen on the outer surface. So what are those liquid water droplets? Because the ice or the cold water, everything is inside the glass. So how do we get liquid water droplets on the outer surface of the glass? So that's the question. So what happens is the air which is present surrounding the gas. So this air is hot when compared to the temperature of the glass, because the glass was at a very cold temperature. So when you bring it out of the refrigerator, still the glass is at a very low temperature, but the surrounding air is at a higher temperature. Right? Now what do you have in the surrounding air? In the surrounding air, water vapor is present. So this water vapor, due to this low temperature, now like how when we heat liquid water, it gets converted into water vapor. In a similar way, when you cool water vapor, it gets converted to liquid water. So when you cool water vapor, it gets converted to liquid water, and this process is called condensation. So condensation is the reverse process of evaporation. So in this case, what happens? You have water vapor in the surrounding air. So those water vapor, due to this cold temperature, gets cooled, and that gets converted to liquid water, which is seen as droplets on the outer surface of the glass. So this experiment proves that it is possible to convert water vapor in the air into liquid water. But how is that possible? By cooling. So these droplets of water were a result of condensation. So using a similar concept, we will also understand the process of formation of clouds. Before that, what is condensation? It is the process in which water vapor is cooled to get converted into liquid water. So you get liquid water from water vapor. So that is called condensation. So you can see this, you can experience this in a lot of other examples also. For example, let's say you are cooking something. So when you cook something, what happens? You are heating that substance. So a lot of water vapor is formed. And suddenly you take a cold lead and you cover that vessel with that cold lead. What happens? You see a lot of droplets of water on the surface of that lead. So that is nothing but the water vapor, which was initially at a higher temperature. When you took that lead in front of them, so the water vapor got exposed to a lower temperature because the lead was at a lower temperature. So as a result, it got condensed to form liquid water droplets, and they were seen as the water droplets on the surface of the lead. So this is another example.